Yeah, so go to our website to learn more about some of our upcoming events, and we do ask people to spread the word. We're really trying to engage with the local community through this program. So the more people we can get out to these events and listen to these webinars, the better. And next, I just want to give a special thank you to tonight's event sponsor. That would be the Giles Restoration Services. So thank you to GRS for supporting tonight's webinar. And very briefly, just to give a quick background on Long Point Basin Land Trust, we are a charitable non-government organization with the mission to protect and restore functioning ecosystems in the Long Point Basin, which is a geographical area located in Central Carolinian region. This is achieved through land securement, habitat restoration, research, and outreach. And we also encourage everyone to visit our website, sign up to our e-newsletter, and join us on social media to learn more about all the things that we have going on and some of the projects we have on some of our nature reserves. And next slide. So a bit more of a background on LPBLT. We currently own and steward about 341 hectares of nature reserves. All of them are located within Norfolk County. And 7 of our nature reserves are open to the public and have or in the process of developing a formal trail system. So we're trying to provide some opportunities for people to connect with the environment through hands-on and outdoor experiences. So there's just a quick map there you can see of all the nature reserves we have throughout Norfolk County. And just again, the Explore the Outdoors program, some of our upcoming events for April, we have the next event would be the Restoring Harlow Dune. This is more of a volunteer work event. And it was initially scheduled for Saturday, April the 23rd. We've had to reschedule that. So it's actually gonna be happening next Wednesday. That's Wednesday, April the 27th from 1 to 3:30. So if anyone listening in tonight is interested in joining us that day, we'll be doing some pine thinning to do some oak savanna restoration work at one of our nature reserves. So I'd be happy to have anyone out to attend that day and help us out with some pine thinning. If anyone's interested in frogs, we have our next event is April the 30th at our Shirley and George Pond Nature Reserve. So if you haven't already done so and you're interested in learning about frogs, we do ask to hop onto our website to join that event as well. And we have with us today Mike Burrell. And just a quick bio or introduction to Mike before he gets started here today. Mike grew up in a nature-loving family outside of Waterloo, Ontario, and inherited his love of birds from his dad. He participated in almost every bird citizen science project he can and currently acts as the Ontario coordinator for eBird Canada. In addition, he acts as a secretary and archivist for the Ontario Bird Records Committee, the Ontario regional editor for the Christmas Bird Count program, several committees for the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas, and is a member of the Bird Specialist Subcommittee of the Committee of the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada. Mike, with his brother Ken, also co-authored the book Best Places to Bird in Ontario. He lives in Peterborough and works as a zoologist with the Ontario Natural Heritage Information Center. So with that, I'll pass it over to Mike to get going on tonight's presentation.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dan. Just give me a second here. I'm going to share my screen. I've got some slides here. Okay, and how's that? Are you seeing that? Thumbs up, Dan? Okay. Okay. Yes, thanks very much for inviting me here. And thanks to all of you who are joining in to listen. I'm going to talk, as Dan said, about Inaturalist tonight. So I'm going to cover a fair bit about what Inaturalist is, as well as some other stuff. And in fact, I did have an outline slide of what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to be talking about where I work, which is the Natural Heritage Information Center. Why I'm even talking to you about Inaturalist and citizen science, and why citizen science is so important. Then we'll get into Inaturalist, what it is. That's sort of the second part, kind of an overview of what Inaturalist is. And then the third part is a walkthrough on how to use iNaturalist. So I'm going to cover all the basics about using it, submitting sightings, how to explore the information, and some of the ways you can get a little more out of it. So I'm hoping there's lots of questions at the end, and we'll be able to do sort of a live demo answering questions. If you want to know how to do something in particular, you can ask those. So I think it'll be easiest if you can type your questions into that chat at any time, but I'm just going to motor through my slides, and then we'll maybe address the questions all at the end. I think that's probably easiest. Okay, so getting into it. The Natural Heritage Information Center. One of our slogans, we've got lots of them. One of them is working with conservation partners to track Ontario's biodiversity. And we've got a nice photo there of a rare species in Ontario, the lakeside daisy. So who are we? What do we do? We are a small unit. There's about 15 staff. And we are a unit within the Science and Research branch of the Ontario Ministry of, ready for this, the Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry. A lot of you have probably heard of us before as the MNR. So we are a part of the Ontario Government, Ontario Public Service in the Ministry of NDMNRF. But we're just a small little unit. But we are also part of a network of 82 other programs that are similar to ours that span the Western Hemisphere. So there's similar programs to ours in virtually every province and state in Canada and the United States, as well as a lot of countries in Central and South America. So we are part of this network called NatureServe, and there's a Canadian division of NatureServe called NatureServe Canada. And this network gives us great power. So we're doing our work here. There's similar folks doing similar work in the other provinces, other states, other countries in similar programs. And we all follow similar methodology for basically assessing species and communities across our jurisdiction and tracking them. So that gives us a real strength that we can draw on the expertise of our colleagues in other programs across the Western Hemisphere. And also allows us to compare information between jurisdictions and allow us to think of things sort of on the bigger picture, not just in our little silo of Ontario. So our role, if you wanted to sum up what our role of the NHIC, the Natural Heritage Information Center, is to maintain a database about where it is in the province that there are important spots for rare species of plants and animals, plant communities, and other special features in the province. So where they are and how they're doing. So to do that takes a lot of information. And so really we're in the business of gathering information and then disseminating it to people who need it. So we get information from all sorts of places. In the past, our sort of traditional sources of information were things like museum specimens, literature records that came from professional researchers, as well as field surveys by professional biologists. Some of them who would have been within provincial and federal governments and municipal governments, but also a lot of that came from private industry and NGO professional biologists. So those are our sort of traditional sources of data where we've, over our first sort of 15 years or so of existence, that's where we're getting a lot of data from. And we've got our little trivia, NHIC trivia nugget. One of our oldest records comes from is of a timber rattlesnake that occurred during the War of 1812 in the Niagara area, and the record came from a medic's notebook. So just an example, we get our information anywhere we can, basically, and it goes back a long ways for some species like that. Now, citizen science data is not a super new thing. It's been around for as long as there's sort of been amateur scientists and amateurs that are interested in nature. So that goes back a long time. But it's really, really grown kind of exponentially in the last decade or two with the advent of handheld technologies and the internet. So we all now have, well, not everybody, but a lot of people are carrying around a little computer in their pocket. Most people can't even keep it in their pocket. They gotta have it in their hand all the time. But those little phones are perfect for documenting the world around us. So keeping lists of birds, taking photos of plants and animals, things like that. And so these citizen science projects have really, really exploded in the last 10 or 15 years, especially. Just to give you a sense of how much they've grown, citizen science now represents 40 to 50% of all the NHIC data that we maintain about where those rare species are in the province. So some of those key kind of citizen science projects that we're tapping into are things like atlases. A lot of you will be familiar with the reptile and amphibian atlas, the butterfly atlas, or the breeding bird atlas as examples. And then there's some mobile citizen science platforms that are things like eBird and Inaturalist. So those are big sources of information for us now. And I'm going to focus in on Inaturalist, as you know, because that's the topic tonight. But I don't want to make it seem as though those other sources aren't important. They're all really important, and we still get a lot of important information from professional biologists as well. But I can't understate how important it is that we get all this information in, and it does take a fair bit of effort for us to compile it, but we're able to have a much better picture of where those rare species are, and then feed that information out to organizations like Long Point Basin Land Trust when they're making decisions about maybe where to acquire properties. It's information that's being used for other conservation planning purposes. There's all sorts of reasons that the data gets used, and sort of the secondary, well, it's not even secondary, but the other purpose of the center is not just to collect the information, but then to make it available to everybody who needs it, so that we can make good decisions about everything when it comes to conserving our rare species. So moving on to our part 2 of the presentation, we're going to focus in on Inaturalist, which is a big important source for us. So Inaturalist, it's been around for 15 years now. It was started in almost 15 years. It was started in 2008 and coordinated by the California Academy of Sciences. And it's this online platform that covers all species. So it's a citizen science platform where anybody can join, and you can report any living creature. So you can report birds, you can report plants, you can report mushrooms, whatever you want. It's all species. And it's really rapidly growing, especially in Ontario. Kind of over the last 3 or 4 years, especially, it's really kind of shot up. So one of the things that makes Inaturalists unique, and I think also really appealing to a lot of people, is it's based on photos. So the idea of an observation that gets submitted to Inaturalist is it's based on a photo. I would say something like 95% of the records in Inaturalist, probably even higher, are based on a photo. You can submit records without a photo. You can use an audio recording for some species, or you can have nothing attached to it. But by and large, Inaturalist is made up of records that have a photo attached to them. And that's really important because a photo acts kind of as a specimen. So a digital specimen, and it allows the community of Inaturalist users to basically go in and review the data. So Inaturalist is really about submitting a record. You've got a photo, you might not even know what it is, but the community can come together and kind of agree on what it is. And sometimes they can't agree, and sometimes they can't even get to what it could be, but they might say, okay, well, we all agree it's a bird. But what kind of bird, we don't know. So there's those different levels of identification that Inaturalist supports. And there's this idea of community data review. And of course, like anything that happens on the internet in 2022, there's apps for it. You can get an app on your Android or iOS device. Okay, so I told you that iNaturalist has really grown. This is iNaturalist use in Ontario. So the blue line is showing how many people were submitting records to iNaturalist just in Ontario each year. And the orange bars are how many observations they submitted. So you can see it started to pick up in 2017, and it's not really slowed down. Really, year-over-year growth has been kind of 300,000 or 400,000 new observations every year. In 2021, our numbers were over 30,000 people submitted over 1 million observations in the province. So it's really growing, which is really cool to see. And the data that comes in is pretty incredible, I have to say. So this one's got a lot going on, and don't glaze over too quick here. What this one is showing is on the left, it's showing you the breakdown by taxonomic group for observations, and on the right, the same thing, but for species. So in Ontario. So what the take home here is, it's a real mixed bag of what people are reporting. The two biggest chunks are insects and plants. And that at first might surprise you, but when you think about what is easy to photograph using your phone, plants and insects are two things that are pretty easy to photograph, and they're all around us. So, there's over 1 million observations of each of those groups, plants and insects. And with plants, there's about 4,500 species have been reported in Ontario, and insects, that number is over 8,500 species. So there's a lot of species and observations of all sorts of groups, but insects and plants are the big ones, and the other sort of groups, especially the vertebrates, make up a smaller portion, mainly because they're harder to see or they're harder to photograph with your phone. So iNaturalist, it has all sorts of different features. One of the things that makes it successful is that community aspect, but another aspect that makes it successful is it has this user rankings kind of. So you can go in and see who's submitted the most observations, who's submitted the most species, and you can do that for any geographic area. So you can kind of have little competitions amongst people to see who's got the most species or most observations, and you can break it down geographically, or you can break it down taxonomically. So you could, go in and see who's got the most species of insects, for example. So the basic unit of iNaturalist is a single observation, and this is what it looks like on the website. This is an observation that I made 2 months ago, and it shows, there's the photo I took of an opossum. This is just outside my house, coming in and eating some birdseed. And so it's got a date attached to it, and it's got a location attached to it. And then the photo is the sort of evidence, the digital specimen. And then that's the basic idea of iNaturalist, a record of a species at a particular place and time. And the nice thing about doing it with your phone is it does most of that information for you. Your phone already knows where you are, and the phone should also know what time and what day it is. So as long as you put in a photo, then you've got all the information that iNaturalist needs to make an observation. So I'll talk about projects a little more in the demo that we're going to do. But there's these things called projects within iNaturalist, which are a way for people to sort of organize projects, or activities kind of. And NHIC, we have our own project, which allows us to sort of collect information that's in iNaturalist, and it gives us a way to export the information then and incorporate it into our external database, which we use, which combines basically the iNaturalist data with all these other data sources. So our project, the timing worked out really well. We started our project in 2017, right at the start of the year, right around this time of year in 2017. And if you can remember back about 5 slides, that's when iNaturalist use was really starting to take off in Ontario. So we started our project just as that was starting to happen. And in that time, we've managed to collect over 100,000 observations of 2,300 rare species in the province. And we have about 1,500 people have joined our project. So we only track about 26 or 2,700 species. So almost all the species that we track, we've gotten a record of. And we've gotten over 100,000 records come in from iNaturalist in those 5 years. So it's really great for us. It allows us to use all the tools that iNaturalist has for things like vetting the records. The community already does some of that for us, and we kind of double check everything. All the records are easy to bring out for us and then incorporate into our NHIC base. So I really love it. It gives us a great source of information, and it gives us a way that we can kind of connect with people who are submitting observations, and it lets you know that your observations are making a big difference because we're grabbing them and incorporating them into our database. Okay, so that's my like quick intro to what iNaturalist is. The next phase of tonight is our walkthroughs, and for this I've got it kind of split up into a couple different parts. The first bit I'm going to do, I've actually pre-recorded myself walkthrough of what you'll see when you go to iNaturalist, just sort of how to get your bearings. And then the next 2 short little videos are ones that I've actually grabbed off of the iNaturalist help files. And they were done by James Paget and his colleagues at the Canadian Wildlife Federation, who are the coordinators of iNaturalist Canada. So those 2 short little videos will show you how to make an observation, either with your computer. And then after those videos, I'm going to come back. You won't even know that I've been gone, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to walk through how to explore the iNaturalist data, and then we'll have time for some questions. Okay, so here we go. So to get to iNaturalist, you want to go to inaturalist.ca. So I'm just going to pause it. Dan, can you give me another head nod that you were able to hear me talking in that video? Okay. To iNaturalist Canada, which is the Canadian portal. You can go to inaturalist.org. Doesn't really make a difference, but if you go to iNaturalist Canada, you're going to see some Canadian specific news. So once you're at inaturalist.ca, you're going to need to log in or sign up. Just going to log in here. And you're going to see now what I call your iNaturalist dashboard. So your dashboard is sort of like a news feed. This is based on people you follow in iNaturalist, species or places you follow. It's sort of like recent observations in those areas. There could be updates from projects you're part of, all that sort of stuff. On the right-hand side, you're going to see some other information related to inaturalist.ca. So as I said earlier, it's managed by the Canadian Wildlife Federation. There's information here about the Inaturalist Forum. This is where you can go and discuss different aspects of iNaturalist with other iNaturalist users. There's these things called subscriptions. There's all sorts of other stuff you're going to see on the sort of welcome screen. You can navigate around to some other options. Underneath your name, you'll see some tabs, and up at the very top, this is your main navigation. So you've got the Explore tool, which is where we're going to talk about later. You can go and see your observations. There's this community aspect to iNaturalist. You can go see people that you follow or find more people to follow, projects, journal posts, and get to the forum. And then there's the Identify tool, and there's some extra stuff under More, things like taxa info, guides, places, that sort of stuff. In the top right, you've got your upload button if you're going to upload observations. And then there's some notification icons. People can send messages within iNaturalist. It would show up with a little number there if I had any unread mail. And then same with the little comment thing. That's for if people are adding comments to observations of mine. And then underneath your icon are a lot of the same things that you can access underneath your name here. So that's a quick overview of what you're going to see when you first open up iNaturalist. But next, I want to move on to show you how to upload an observation. So
once you find something you'd like to record, just tap Observe on iPhones or the green plus for Androids. You can choose to take a photo, choose no photo, or on some devices, record a sound. Check to see if sound recording is an option on your device. If you're observing something that is better captured with a digital camera, like needing a zoom for a faraway bird or a macro lens for an insect, you can take a placeholder photo in the app or choose no photo and add the digital picture later by editing your observation on the inaturalist.ca website. This gives the benefit of capturing the date, location, and any notes while on site, and adding a better photo later. If you're taking a photo with a mobile device, you can review your picture once done and tap Next or OK if it looks good. To identify it, hit What did you see? If you have internet connection, iNaturalist will suggest visually similar species and the species group it belongs to. You can choose one of those or write the species name in yourself. It's okay if you don't know what it is. You can simply add the general group like lichens, and people in the iNaturalist community can help you identify it. If you don't have an internet connection, one option is to come back to edit this observation later once you have internet again. On the observation details screen, you can add more photos of the same organism or write a note. This could include details that might help others confirm your identification. The date, time, and location should be automatically added. If they aren't, check the location services in the settings of your device. You can also change the geoprivacy of the observation. Open will allow others on iNaturalist to see the location. Obscured will randomly buffer the true location, or private will ensure that it doesn't show up on any maps. Mark whether it's captive or cultivated, or added to a project. Once you're finished, tap for the check mark for Android, and your observation will be uploaded for everyone to see and identify. You can uncheck the automatic upload box in the app settings if, for example, you would like to go back and edit your observations before they are submitted to iNaturalist. In this case, observations are stored on your device until you manually hit upload. Head to inaturalist.ca and create an account or log in to an existing account. To get to the uploader, click on the green Uploader button in the header, and from here, drag and drop the files you want to add or choose from the menu. Once you've dragged in your photos and sounds, iNaturalist will import each one as a card in the workspace here. Keep in mind, the photos have not been added as observations in iNaturalist just yet. That won't happen until you hit the green Submit button in the upper right-hand corner. We recommend not adding more than about 50 files at a time into the uploader page. Now that your observation cards are all in your workspace, you can start editing their information. You can edit a single observation by clicking on it here and entering the information directly on the card, or in this area on the left-hand side. You'll see that Geoprivacy, Captive Cultivated, Tags, Projects, and Observation Fields are all on the left-hand side as well. For Geoprivacy, Open will allow others on iNaturalist to see the location. Obscured will randomly buffer the true location, or Private will ensure that it doesn't show up on any maps. To add an identification, click on the species name field, and iNaturalist will suggest visually similar species. Or you can type in a common or scientific name and choose from the drop-down menu. There's no sound recording software on iNaturalist, so you'll have to type in the species name. To add or edit location information, click on the location space here. You'll see that a location editor pops up, and you can type a place into the search bar at the top. Note that this will not search Inaturalist curated places. Rather, it's a Google Maps name search. And from here, you can pick a point and drag these control dots on the circle to show the accuracy level of your location. Once you're done, click on Update Observation to get back to your workspace. If you often make observations at the same location, such as a local park or your backyard, you can save it to your account as a pinned location. Once you have the correct coordinates, accuracy, geoprivacy settings, and notes in these fields, click on the Pin button. Location will be saved. You can access it by clicking on your pinned locations right here. Now, these two photos are the same organism, so you would want to combine them into one observation. You can either select them both and click Combine up at the top, or drag one card onto the other, and there you go. They've been merged into one. The date was stored in the photo's properties, which Inaturalist has read. And if the photo was taken with a mobile device or digital camera with a built-in GPS, the location will also be automatically added. If not, check the location services on your device. These locations will not have an accuracy though, so it is very important to manually add that in. Otherwise, we can't know if you are at the observation or perhaps several hundred meters away. Finally, let's say you want to batch edit your cards. You can select certain cards with your mouse, or click Select All at the top. Once you've selected all the observations you'd like to edit, you can use the forms on the left-hand side to do so. Anything you enter on the left-hand side will affect all the cards you have selected. Now that you've edited everything you want to, you just have to hit Submit, and they will be added to your account and the Inaturalist database.
Okay,
Head to
that was my little break. I hope you guys enjoyed those, and you were busy taking notes, I'm sure. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the final part of the walkthrough. I'm gonna switch over, I'm gonna exit my slides, and I'm gonna pull up Inaturalist. I'm gonna use it live to show how to do some of the exploring of data right on Inaturalist. And once we're done that, then we'll be able to get into the questions. So let me just do that. I'm gonna have to stop sharing for a second, and then, oh, actually I can do a new share. Okay, 1 second here. Okay. And share my screen. Okay. Dan, need one last thumbs up. Are you seeing Inaturalist? Yeah, okay, cool, thanks. Okay, so this is what I was talking about as your dashboard or your news feed on Inaturalist. This is what you see once you've logged in. It's your custom sort of content. So I'm gonna take us through some common explore things you can do. So I'm gonna start with clicking the Explore menu up at the top. So that's going to take me to the observation map. So here is our map, and I have it in my my user settings. I've got it set so it defaults to Ontario. So if you haven't done that, then you're going to see a map of the world with all the observations in Inaturalist. But I've got it set to Ontario. You can change it to whatever you want. You can set it to Norfolk County if you wanted. So we're seeing all the observations. We're seeing that there are just over 3 million observations, almost 20,000 species, 24,000 people have identified things, and 64,000 people have submitted an observation. They show up on the map when you're zoomed out like this. They show up as little squares, just filling in the grid, and they're shaded darker based on how many observations there are. So you can see, not surprisingly, in Ontario, there's more observations in Southern Ontario where there's lots of people, and much fewer in the north where it's harder to get. So I'm going to, oh yeah, and then you can toggle between map view, grid view, and list view. So this is the map. The grid shows you some of the most recent observations that have been submitted. Somebody's been submitting some pigeon records, pied-billed grebe, yeah, a bunch of different stuff. So that's the grid, shows you a bigger picture, and then list view is similar, but shows you the information in a small thumbnail. So that is what, those are some of the things you can do on the Explorer. I'm gonna refine our search. I'm gonna switch back to our map, and I'm gonna refine it to Norfolk and Norfolk County, Ontario. And so there we go, we've zoomed in to Norfolk County. So Norfolk County, there's 77,000 observations, 6,000 species, and just shy of 2,000 people. So we've got our map. We can zoom in a little bit. And once you zoom in a bit, it switches over to these pins. And now you'll see they're kind of rainbow colored. And those pins, they're actually color coded based on the taxonomic group. So you can click on an individual pin to find out what it represents. So for instance, let's see here, we've got a blue, and that is a muskrat. And I bet you that's in the wrong spot, because that'd be pretty amazing to see a muskrat way out off the lake. But so they're color coded. The blue are vertebrates, so birds, mammals, fish, reptiles, and amphibians. The orange are your invertebrates, insects and other invertebrates. So let's click on an insect record over here. Asian lady beetle. And then green are plants, makes sense. And then the pink ones are fungi and lichens. So they're color coded that way. You can, if you want to filter these results down, they're pretty hard to look at right now, the way there's so many. You can put something in the species box, so you can search for a particular species. If you're interested in one particular species, you could filter it by a group too. So let's try insects. Actually, you know what? I'm going to try butterflies and moths. So you can type in Lepidoptera, which is the scientific name, and I started typing it, and there it is. Or I could type in butterflies, and there it pops up. So I'm going to select butterflies and moths. Okay, so we've whittled it down to just 23,000 observations, and still almost 2,000 species. There's still a lot of records there. So lots of ways you can whittle it down. I'm going to click on a record. Let's see, find something here. Let's try this one here, Virginia tenuta. So I'm going to open this observation up by clicking on it. And this was from somebody I bet a lot of you know, Audrey. I assume that's Audrey A. Hege. It's probably a good guess. Is she on the call? No, I didn't see her log in, but so there's a record. Audrey has taken a photo of a caterpillar, and this was just 4 days ago. And so she put in that the identification was Virginia tenuta, and somebody else, T-Ren, came along and agreed with the identification. You can see the date, April 17th. You can see where it is. There's the spot on the map. But one of the cool things you can do with iNaturalist, you can click on the species name to go to a species page where you can get a bit of information about the species. So in Ontario, remember I've got my default area set to Ontario. We're on the Virginia tenuta page, and we can see some stats about the species. So the top observer is Odrog. I don't know how you say their nickname, but they've got 61 observations. Paul Judson has 336 identifications of the species. He's the top identifier. The last record in Ontario was April 20th, so yesterday. And there are a total of 3,500 records. So cool, that's neat to know. I really like this little chart here, and it builds a little line chart based on the seasonality of the species. So you can see in Ontario, if you want to see this species, your best bet is probably in June. That's when the most records are seen, but it's reported right through the winter, probably as caterpillars would be my guess. and gradually increases to when it's out in June and July. Now, the really cool thing for insects is you can do it by life stage. So I'm going to click that one. And here is our life stage. So the blue, if I hover it, it's telling me blue is larva. So the blue is when you're likely to see the larvae. So looks like the species must overwinter as a caterpillar. People see the caterpillars in the fall, even in the winter, and then that's this peak in April and May, like the one Audrey reported. And then this second peak is orange, that's the adults. And then the gray one is nobody recorded whether it was an adult or a larva. So it's unknown, but I think we can make a pretty safe guess that they're probably adults based on the other one. So pretty cool that you can do it that way. You can do it by sex also. I don't think that's going to tell us anything. Nope. I think it's probably pretty hard to tell the sexes apart in the species. So this is the species page, and you can get here under the More menu under taxa info. You can get it there that way, or you can get there by clicking on a species name within an observation. Now there is other information here. You can see the map of the species. And this is showing you where all the records are. So it's a species found in the northeast of North America, basically. The About page pulls the Wikipedia entry. There's a taxonomy tab, which tells you where it fits into sort of the taxonomic family tree, as well as different names that it's called. If there's any conservation status, it would be provided here. And then another cool aspect on this page is the similar species. And so this tells you in Ontario, these are the species that have been reported to iNaturalist, and then it turned out to be Virginia tenuta. So the most likely is this yellow colored scape moth, which if you look at this one and this one, they are pretty similar. Virginia tenuta looks very similar to that one, and that's why there's at least 31 misidentifications. There's other species that it's been reported as maybe as the caterpillars because the adults don't look very similar. But so it's a handy little feature that I think a lot of people kind of overlook. Okay, I'm going to jump backwards a couple screens back to our map, and I'm going to use this filters option. So this filter button has lots of things you can filter by. You can filter by date. You can filter by various aspects, whether it's captive or it's wild or it needs identification. There's even more filters. I'm going to filter here based on the person. So I'm going to look for my records. There's me. I'm going to update the search, and we'll see. There we go. So I've got actually 467 observations of butterflies and moths in Norfolk County, which I couldn't have told you that 20 minutes ago. So you can go in and see your observations, and I figured it would be pretty high because I've been in Norfolk looking for moths and stuff a fair bit. So there's lots of things you can filter on the map. Okay. I'm going to head back to the dashboard. So I'm hovering over my name. I'm going to click dashboard. That's back to our sort of homepage. Another thing you can do on iNaturalist is you can set up subscriptions. So I'm scrolling down to this bit called subscriptions. And these are like email-based subscriptions. You can turn off the emails, but this is one way that you can populate your news feed. So I've got a few different subscriptions. One of them, I've subscribed to records around my yard here in Peterborough. I've also subscribed to fish records in Ontario. I want to see fish records show up. I've also subscribed to records from Charleston Lake Provincial Park, a place I like to spend time at. And then I'm also interested in cicadas in Ontario. So I've subscribed to cicadas in Ontario. So any records that fit those subscriptions, they'll show up in my news feed here. That's what some of these records are. This news feed also gets filled with records from people that I'm following. And so you can follow individual people within iNaturalist. So, and you can turn it on in your user settings so you get like a daily email summarizing what's been reported that fit your subscriptions. So it's really easy to subscribe. To make a subscription, you want to click on place generally, unless you want to get a subscription for the entire world for a species. You could do that, but most people want it filtered by place. So I'm going to click subscribe to a place. I'm going to type in Norfolk. Gotta spell it right. There's Norfolk. And let's say I want to see beetles. There's beetles. I'm going to save it. And so now, starting now, any beetle records that get submitted to Inaturalist in Norfolk County, they're going to show up in my news feed. So the subscriptions, some people like those. Okay, next thing I'm going to show you is how to make add an identification to a record. So let's find a record that I think I can add an identification to. Okay, I know that one. So I'm going to click on, this is in my news feed. This is one way you can do it. I'll show you another way in a second. So I'm going to click on this record. And this is from my friend Mark Reed. And that's why those records were in my news feed, is because he's somebody I follow. So he photographed this moth a couple weeks ago now, April 6th. And this is up near Murphy's Point Provincial Park, where he works. And so he's reported as a small Phygalia moth. And I agree, that's what it is. So I can just click agree. Or if I disagreed, I could click suggest an identification and type in what I think it is. If you disagree with somebody, it's best practice to add an explanation why you disagree or why you're improving. Maybe he just had it in as mothspa, and you could explain that's what this is. But I'm going to click agree. And so now that record is now what Inaturalist calls research grade, because it's got a photo, it's got a date and a place, and it's got at least 2 people that agree on the observation. And then they've got this mathematical equation based on, if there's more people and some people disagree, it's got to basically be like 70% of the people must agree on the identification for it to be research grade. So that's one way you can do identifications. The other way you can do identifications, which is a little more efficient if you're going to do lots of identifications, is use the identify tool. That's found right up at the top. I'm going to click identify. And it's going to give you, by default, it's going to give you every single record in Ontario that's currently waiting to be ID'd, basically. So let's see how many we got. We've got 33,000 pages of observations. There's, I think, 30 observations. So what is that? Like 100,000? No, it's like, I don't know. I can't do that math. Is it a million? I don't know. Okay, it is a lot. So there's a lot of observations just waiting to be ID'd. And so even if you're not super active adding observations, you can be very active adding identifications to these records. And some of them, you can filter it down. Like if you are an expert on beetles, you could say, show me beetle records that are in Ontario that need identifications. Or if you know a certain group of beetles, you could click on them. But I'm going to go back because I did see a couple that I knew I could identify. Let's see. They've already shifted since we last were here. So here is a hawk, and I can identify that. So this person has identified it as a buteo, which I agree it is in that genus. I'm going to add an ID because I can go one step further. And so this is a red-tailed hawk. So I started typing, and I can add some notes. You don't have to when you're just refining the identification, but especially if you disagree, it's definitely best practice to do so. I'm going to say, just one little field mark I know. So I've added red-tailed hawk, and so now it changes up in the top there, it changes it to red-tailed hawk. And it still needs ID because it needs another person at least to agree on the record. So you could tab through these. You can go to the next record, and the person says that this is a sparrow and I agree, so I'm going to click agree. And got to wait for the internet to work here. There it is. And so now it's changed that record to research grade. It does have suggestions as well. And this is an aspect that James, in that video you were watching, he kind of glossed over, but this is a really cool feature of iNaturalist, is when you put in a photo, if you just put your cursor in the species box, it will actually suggest what it thinks it is based on these super complex things that I don't understand, but they're using this computer vision to basically guess what species does that look like based on all these other records that they have in the database. And so in this case, it's correct. Its top choice was song sparrow, and that's what it is. So it's pretty cool, this ID suggestions that iNaturalist has built in. Okay, so we've done ad identifications. Okay, so I'll show you two more things. So I'm going to go back. Okay, so I'm back on this observation from my friend Mark, and this is how you can click on somebody's profile. So I'm going to click on his name, and there's Mark. He doesn't really look like that anymore. That's from like 20 years ago, probably. But that's Mark, and so he's got some people that he follows. I could send him a message if I wanted. There's that little message box. I can see all this information about what observations he's made and things like that. And then up here, there's the stop following Mark Reed. So I'm going to click it. So this is what you would see if you're not following somebody. There's this follow Mark Reed or follow Mike Burrell. So you can click that, and then you start following them. Doesn't give them a notification or anything. It just all it really makes a difference is then you start seeing that person's observations, which is pretty cool. If you find some people that are making observations at interesting places, could be anywhere in the world, you start seeing what they're seeing. It's pretty neat. Okay, so that's the following people. And then the last thing I'm going to show you are these things called projects. And I mentioned the NHIC project already. So I'm going to click under community. There's this thing called projects. And if you're on iNaturalist Canada, then you're going to see projects from Canada. And there's like thousands and thousands of projects. So you really do need to know the projects you're looking for. And in this case, I'm going to tell you the project you should be looking for. You should be looking for the NHIC project, but you should also be looking for the Long Point Basin Land Trust project. I'm going to try Long Point Basin, see if that pulls it up. Okay, so here are projects. So Long Point Basin Land Trust has projects for most of their properties. So an individual project, like the Spring Arbor Farm Nature Reserve, the Arthur Langford Nature Reserve, and why isn't that one coming up? Okay, well, I'm gonna click on this one. This is the main one. Okay, so this project is a special type of project called an umbrella project, which really just aggregates individual smaller projects. So this Long Point Basin Land Trust project has all the individual property projects right in. So if you go to the main project, then you can find all the property projects. So it's pretty great to see. There's over 600 observations made at these properties already, almost 400 species, and 55 people have made those observations. I'm going to click on the Shirley and George Pond Nature Reserve project. And so this is what you see on a typical project like this. So 200 observations, 140 species, 17 observers. Here's some recent observations made yesterday, 1 day ago. Nice. You guys are definitely ahead of Peterborough with your spring flowers coming out. You can see who's got the most observations. It's Jingles. Is Jingles on the call? I don't know. We'll ask in the question period. And then here's a map of the property. So you've got the boundary loaded up. You can zoom out if you weren't sure where it is, but this can help you find where the property is. And I think one of the underrated aspects of iNaturalist is you can use it to find trails. So I would bet there's probably a trail that follows right along here, this little trail of observations. And you can see, you can click on one of those observations to see what's been seen. So I don't know, Dan, was there any more about this particular project?
Sorry, Mike, you just cut out there. What were you asking?
I was just saying, is there any more you wanted to say about this project in particular?
Oh yeah, no, I think that pretty much covers it. We're just encouraging folks to get out onto our reserves, and yeah, we'd like to learn a little bit more about what species we have at the pond property, particularly. We've had quite a few restoration efforts going on there over the years, and right now we're doing a pretty aggressive invasive species control program there. So we've done quite a bit of invasives removal, and I'd just be curious to see how like wildlife responds to, you know, reduction in the invasive species populations, and hopefully increasing our native species on the property. Yeah, so and that property particularly, I'm working on getting the trails nice and groomed. So yeah, you're right there. There are trails definitely following those observations, but yeah, so it's a good, I think, a kilometer and a half or so of hiking, and it's got really nice views, and yeah, there's really good ponds on there, and frogs are calling right now, and we have lots of birds coming up in the fields. We put up some bird boxes the other day, and we already have a bunch of tree swallows on there. So yeah, just encouraging people to get out to the properties, that's all.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, and so these projects are a great way you can make your observations in iNaturalist, and then these projects you don't even need to join. They work without joining the project. So if you join, then you can find them a little easier the next time you go onto the website. But any observations you make that fall within one of the boundaries, then it's going to get added to these projects right away, and it'll help Dan and Kristen and all the other staff at Long Point Basin Land Trust know what's been seen at their properties, and it goes a long way. So that was the end of my demo. I see there's a few things in the chat, so I'm going to keep my screen shared just in case we want to see some more stuff. But that's the demo, and I hope that you've picked up a few new things. My biggest sort of recommendation is to just play around with iNaturalist, make some observations. If you've got a smartphone, put it on your phone. You'll be able to wow your friends by letting the app identify things and tell you what they are. But just play around with it. It's fun, and you get the hang of it just by playing around. So,
great. Well, yeah, thank you, Mike. I don't have any questions yet in the chat, but I can get us started here. I have a couple of questions myself. Oh yeah, we just got one in from Dale. He's asking, are records for species at risk obscured?
Yeah, great question. And I purposely didn't put it in the talk because I knew somebody would ask. So yeah, there's a subset of species at risk. There was a process about a year ago where they consulted a whole bunch of experts across Canada, and they basically came up with a list of species that that whole group of experts decided was, these are species that are subject to persecution and harm if the locations were made available, precise locations. So anything that's on that list, and it's not just species at risk even. There's species like pawpaw, for instance, is on that list. Even though it's not a species at risk, it's rare enough in Southern Ontario, and there's sort of a pressure on it, you know, people collecting it and things like that. So anything that's on that list automatically gets obscured within iNaturalist. So it shows up, and you know it's somewhere in like a 20-kilometer area, but you can't see where it exactly is. And then James was showing it in that video that you can set the geoprivacy on a record manually if you want. So if you're really concerned about a record, you could do that. But anything that the experts decided was going to be really at risk if the location was given away, the exact location, then it'll be auto obscured.
Other question, one question I had is if a user has, say someone has like a bunch of old photos on their phone or camera from like years ago, can they still upload old photos, or do they have to be like recently taken?
No, yeah, absolutely, go back through. So yeah, I went through a period about 5 years ago when I started really getting into iNaturalist. I went through and I scoured all my old hard drives and stuff and tried to find all my old photos. The challenge with those is remembering where you took the photos. If they're digital photos, they've at least got the date and time saved right in the photo. But yeah, it's you got to be able to remember where you took the photo. It can be the hard part.
Right. Dale, I guess, has a follow-up question there. Geoprivacy only applies to individual species, or could a project pre-sort what has to be obscured? Example, like brook trout.
Yeah, so the geoprivacy, there's two ways it can be set. The one is by the species level. So that's that list I was talking about. And those are set at a province level. So in Ontario, there's, these 30 or 40 species that are set to be automatically obscured. The other way it can be set is by the user on an individual observation. So if I'm going out and I don't think brook trout is on that list, but if I was catching brook trout or monitoring brook trout at a place where I didn't think that it was public knowledge and I thought there was a good reason not to let everybody know, then I could obscure that record. You can't do it at a project level. The project is more about getting the data out. It doesn't have any controls. So you can submit an observation and it could be part of like 1,000 different projects technically. It's just one way to think of the project is just sort of a pre-made query about the data. It's not, and then it feeds out those pre-made query results, but it's not actually controlling anything to do with the observation itself. Yep. Yeah. So you know what I do, Richard, is I actually do that a lot, and I don't even bother taking the photo of the back of the camera. What I do is I just make an observation on my phone, and I don't even have a photo attached to it, because you can put in records without photos and then add the photo later, like you're talking about. So that's one option for sure.
Because
it's probably your easiest option, unless you're willing to go buy a whole new camera that's got a built-in GPS.
I got another question for you, Mike. Do you know if is there any plans to like link iNaturalist with other citizen science programs like eBird and stuff like that?
So in a way they are linked already. Okay. So there's another kind of online database called the Global Biodiversity Information Framework, I think is what it is. It's GBIF, where iNaturalist records go and eBird records go, and a bunch of other sources of information go to one sort of central database. Okay. So yeah, in some ways they are linked, but it's anything further than that, I'm not aware of any direct plans.
Cool. What if someone takes a photo that has, say, like 2 beetles on it? Would that conflict what the observation is going to be in terms of what the identification is going to turn out to be? Or
yeah, so if you've got we like to call those twofers or threefers. We get really excited when you got like 4 species in one photo. So you can do I'll pull up a record here of mine. You can actually duplicate your observations, and then if you want to use the computer vision identifier thing, it's better if you can crop the individual animal or plant that you're trying to get. You're going to confuse it if you've got a real zoomed out photo and it's got like a flock of birds or something. It's gonna confuse it. You're more likely to get an accurate identification suggested to you if you can crop it, and you can do that cropping right in the app. Let me find something. Okay, here's a good one. Okay, so I'm going to open up. Are you seeing this record now of mine? It's got a little bunch of leaves.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so this is a perfect example. So I took this photo last fall, and so I have identified it tentatively. Nobody has agreed yet as a gull midge in the genus Asphodyllia. Okay, so I've got that midge, but it's also technically it's an observation of the plant. What plant was that? It was on white flat top goldenrod. So I could duplicate it and put it in as the plant. So under edit, there's this little option called duplicate. And so that copies all the information about the record, including the photo. And then I can just put in, oh, what the heck was it called? There it is. I put in, and I'm going to put in the notes that it's, okay, so I'm going to save it. And so now I've got an observation that I've just, like I said, it's a twofer. I took one photo and I get a 2-for-1 deal on it.
That's cool.
So the good ones are like you've got a dragonfly, or maybe you got a robber fly eating a flower fly, and it's on a plant, on a flower. So you can do like 3. Those ones are pretty fun. But yeah, you can absolutely, and like I said, it's better if you can crop it if you can, or specify in the comments what this observation represents, because I have seen it sometimes where the people trying to ID it end up arguing with each other, and then they realize, oh well, I was talking about this insect and you were talking about the bird that was eating it, and of course we're not going to get the same identification.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
One last question from my end. This is actually coming from Kristen. She just is curious to know if you know what the best record is for an observer.
The best record, like most observations.
Yeah, is there like a gold a winner here with number of observations?
Oh yeah, well we can go figure it out. So I'm on Explore, and we'll figure it out for Ontario first.
Okay.
So in Ontario, the person with the most records is Owen Clarkin, followed closely by Jem Redwood. They both have 36,000. And I used to be up here. Geez, yeah, I'm way down, number 20.
It's like a full-time job.
Yeah, and then species-wise, it's Owen Ridgen, who,
okay.
Yeah, you guys would know him. He's got 4,500 species, pretty amazing. And I'm a little higher in that ranking. I'm number 9, but I think I used to be number 1. So I've fallen out. But let's see, in the world, it's going to be something crazy. There are some pretty dedicated people. 16,000 species, and somebody has almost 200,000 records.
Wow. So they would have signed up probably in 2008 to get that many by now, right?
Not necessarily. Like here's one, John Reynolds. He's from Ontario. He lives in BC now, and he'll go on a run. He's into like long distance trail running, and he'll like photograph things as he's running. He photograph plants, and so he like some of these people can get like hundreds of observations in a day. And especially if you live somewhere tropical or where it's green all year, you could be doing it all year, right?
Yeah.
So,
I never thought of that before, but yeah, if you like to travel a lot, this would be a great way to kind of learn about ecosystems in other parts of the world. If you say go on a trip to Southeast Asia, you can probably take a ton of photos and see, what you saw while you're on your trip.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, I've got, I'll go to my observations. Like I've got a few trips down into the tropics there. I don't know, what do I have that's kind of interesting?
So you could track every country you've been to. We
Yeah,
had one
exactly.
more question coming in, so I'll give
Okay.
Lydia a chance to ask it here.
Yeah, so I'm going to try showing you a little easier. Okay. So the hardest part is you have to find the person you want to follow. So to find them, that's the tricky part. If you know their username, then it's pretty straightforward. So under community, there's this people. So we could click that, and then you can search for somebody's name. So
Okay.
let's say. Okay, so there I just searched for Skevington. I found.
All right. So there's,
found Jeff.
Yeah. Okay.
So I could click on the person's name, and there's Jeff, and so I'm already following him.
Mhm.
But if you weren't following him already, then it would say follow Jeff Skevington.
Okay.
That's
All right.
that's the easiest. But if you find them in like an observation, then you can click their name in the observation too.
Great. We still have a couple of minutes here if anyone has any last minute burning questions.
Yeah, you can find me on iNaturalist. My username's just Mike Burrell, but you can even just look for Burrell, Burrell, and then you can message me on iNaturalist, and we can try to answer your questions that way too.
Great. And if someone makes their account, and so yeah, like your account name doesn't necessarily have to be your username doesn't have to be your actual name, right? So they can still search you by your given name, even though you're.
Yeah. So I'm never sure how this stuff works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is searching my username, but also my name.
It pops up in your information. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and you don't have to give your name. So under like my profile, I do have my name. If I went into edit account settings though, you don't have to have your name there. If you're uncomfortable with that, you can just you can kind of stay anonymous if you want.
Right. Great.
Yeah.
That was a great talk. I learned a lot about it. I haven't used iNaturalist a whole lot myself, but I'm definitely motivated to get out now and start using it a bit more. So yeah.
Great.
Yeah, well, thanks
it's
again.
It's time of year to try, and like I said, that computer vision part of it is really, really cool. You'll learn a lot, and for things like plants, it's really, really accurate in Ontario, especially. Like if you find any spring ephemerals that are blooming this time of year, it should nail the identification like every time.
Yeah, so it'd be a good like handy tool just to learn, like, you know, when you're out for hikes and stuff, what learn species and how to identify them. And
yeah,
that's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Well, yeah, thanks again, and thanks everyone for joining us tonight. As Kristen was saying there, we're going to send out a link to the recording later on. So if anyone wants to share the video, or if you want to listen to it again, or if you had to miss part of it, and we're going to upload it up on YouTube as well, so it'll be accessible there. And again, just want to remind everyone to, you know, if you're interested, if you enjoyed today's event or you wanted to come out, we have other events. We want to get a little bit more out on the reserves too, so we'll be doing some events in person now that we're, you know, coming into the nice weather again. So we're looking forward to that and having a good 2022 season. And as well, yeah, if you go to longpointbasinlandtrust.ca/events, that's the webpage where we have posted all of our upcoming events for this year. So please do go and register and sign up for a newsletter if you want to get information on any upcoming events and things that we have throughout the year. All right. So with that, I think we'll stop recording and wish everyone a good evening and hope to see you again.
Thanks for having me. Nice to talk to everybody.